Welcome back. In this section, we will be learning about data collection methods and sampling techniques. There are two types of data. First of all, let me define data. Data are characteristics or information, usually numerical, that are collected through observation. In a more technical sense, data is a set of values of qualitative or quantitative variables about one or more persons or objects. So there are two types of data, primary and secondary data. Primary data, the distinct feature of the primary research is that the research is focusing on collecting data directly rather than depending on data collected from previously done research. Primary quantitative research is most widely used method for conducting research. Secondary data. Secondary quantitative research or desk research is a research method that involves using already existing data or secondary data. Existing data is summarized to increase the overall effectiveness of research. This research method involves the collection of quantitative data from existing data sources like internet, government resources, libraries, research report, etc. Secondary quantitative research helps to validate the data that is collected from the primary quantitative research as well as aid in the strengthening or proving or disproving previously collected data. There are various sources for secondary data. We're going to discuss some of them here. The first source is data available on the internet. With the high penetration of the internet and mobile devices, it has become increasingly easy to conduct quantitative research using the internet. Information about the most research topic is available online, and this aids in boosting the validity of the primary quantitative data as well as proving the relevance on previously collected data. Secondly, government and non-government sources. Secondary quantitative research can also be conducted with the help of government and non-government sources that deal with market research reports. This data is highly reliable and in-depth and hence can be used to increase the validity of the quantitative research. Public libraries. Now a sparingly used method for conducting quantitative research, it is still a reliable source of information though. Public libraries have copies of important researches that were conducted earlier. They are a storehouse of valuable information and documents from which information can be extracted. Educational institutes. Educational institutes conduct in-depth research on multiple topics and hence the reports that they publish are important source of validation in quantitative research. Commercial information sources, local newspapers, journals, magazines, radio, and TV stations are good sources to obtain data for secondary quantitative research. These commercial information sources have in-depth, first-hand information on economic development, political agenda, market research, demographic segmentation, and similar subjects. After knowing the basic about the primary and secondary data, we will move towards the data collection methods. Primary data can be collected through interviews, surveys, observation. The choice of the method depends on the four factors: target population, sample characteristics, research topic, and available resources. So the first method was interview. They are effective in getting cooperation. Advantages include answer responded questions. We can probe for answers, ask complex and sequence questions, collect data by multiple methods, build a rapport, conduct long interviews. The disadvantages include costly, it is very costly, requires training of the interviewer, and collection period are longer. The second method is surveys. They are excellent for asking people about their perception, opinions, and ideas. Less accurate for measuring behavior. Samples should be representative of the whole. There are various methods to conduct surveys. The first one is self-administered. The advantages are can be used for long, complex responses. Privacy of the respondent is maintained. Disadvantages include needs a carefully designed questionnaire, literate respondents, and no control over the choice of the respondent. Then the next type is known as group administration, where you administer the question in form of small groups. The advantages are high cooperation, study can be explained in detail, queries can be addressed, and it's low cost. While the disadvantages is it can only be used in very few situations, because in this type of administration we cannot make the privacy of the respondent up to the mark. The next administration type is known as dropping off. It is a method in which the questionnaire is dropped off by a researcher at someone's home, office, or school, and they are given the period of weeks or days, and it is collected after that specific time period. The advantages include it can explain the study address and queries and designate respondent. Response rate are really high, give the time for answers that require deliberation. Disadvantages include its high cost and its need a field staff to reach the person. Then the next type is known as telephone interviewing. Advantages include low cost, random digit dialing sampling, access to certain population, shorter period of data collection, management and staffing easier, better response rate. Disadvantages include limited to the people with telephones, more non-respondent than face-to-face interviewing, as a lot of people tend to don't pick up the call, or if they pick up the call they don't give the consent to answer. Questionnaire length constraints and less appropriate for sensitive question. Last type for survey administration is known as mail surveys. In this type of administration, we mail the survey to different participants and wait for their reply. Advantages include low cost, minimal staff and facilities, access to dispersed population, respondents have time to answer the question requiring deliberation. Disadvantages include ineffective for getting cooperation, need an updating mailing list, and interviewers are not involved or available. Now, after learning the data collection method, we will be moving towards sampling and sampling techniques. So sampling is a process or technique of selecting a representative part of the population to determine parameters or characteristics of a whole population. Developing a sampling plan includes the following steps. Define the population of interest, identify a sampling frame, select a sampling method, determine the sampling size, and execute the sampling plan. There are two types of sampling techniques: random sampling technique, also known as probability sampling, and non-random sampling technique. When each unit in a population has known and equal probability of it being included in the sample is known as random sampling. It is further divided into simple random sampling technique is basically a method of probability sampling in which every unit has an equal chance of being selected in a sample. Type 2 is systematic random sampling. Systematic random sampling is method of probability sampling in which the defined target population is ordered and the sample is selected according to a position using a skip interval. The main advantage of using systemic sampling over simple random sampling is its simplicity. It allows the researcher to add a degree of system or process into the random sampling of objects and subjects. The method includes obtain a sample frame, that is the list of the unit of the target population, determine the number of units in the list and desired sample size, compute the skip interval by dividing the total number of the sample with the sample size, determine a random start point, beginning at the start point, select the unit by choosing each unit that corresponds to the skip interval. For example, you plan to conduct a research on school students and their sleeping habits. So for the sampling frame, you would acquire the data from the school regarding all the students. Then you will arrange them in the list and find out the total population of the school. For example, it's 600, and then you calculate the sample size and you find it like 150. So you will calculate the skip interval by dividing the total number of the sample with the sample size. So if we divide 600 by 150, we get 4. So the skip interval is 4. Then you determine a random start point. So out of the 600 student, you just randomly pick a number. You will start from the student number 8. So you start from the student number 8 and then skip 4 student and then include the next student. So if you start from 8, you will note the reading and the data from the 8th person. Then you will skip 9, 10, 11 and 12. Then and you will take the data from the 13th person. I hope it's clear. So moving to the next technique, that is known as stratified random sampling. Stratified random sampling method is of probability sampling in which the population is divided into different subgroups and samples are selected from each stratum. Stratification can be done on the basis of any property of the population, for example, gender, race, age group, etc. So divide the target population into homogeneous subgroups or strata. Draw random samples from each stratum. Combine the samples from each stratum into the single sample of target population. A stratified sample can provide greater precision than a simple random sampling technique. A stratified sample often requires a smaller sample with saved resources. A stratified sample can guard against an unrepresentative sample, for example, all male sample from a mixed gender population. So for example, you have research data and you divide them on the basis of the age group. Age group, like you divide on the basis of age group 18 to 24, 25 to 30, 31 to 35 in multiple age groups, and you determine to take each the equal number of the participants from each group. So this is known as stratified random sampling. Then the next type of sampling technique is known as cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is a sampling technique where the entire population is divided into groups or cluster and a random sample of these clusters are selected. Example, schools, cities and districts. All observations in the selected clusters are included in the sample. When the population is concentrated in natural clusters, city blocks, schools, hospitals, for example, to conduct a personal interview of nurses, it might make sense to randomly select a sample of hospital and then interview all the nurses at the hospital. In this way, the interviewer could conduct many interviews in a single day at a single hospital. Instead, using simple random sampling, the interviewer might require to spend most of the time traveling to conduct a single interview at a single hospital. So moving towards the next type of sampling technique, that is known as non-random or non-probability sampling. It is a process in which the personal judgment determines which sampling unit of the population are selected for a sample. It is further divided into three types. Purposive sampling. It is a non-random sampling in which the selection of the sampling unit is based on a person's expertise or judgment about the population. The next is quota sampling. In quota sampling, the population is first segmented into subgroups, just as in stratified sampling. Then judgment is used to select the subjects or unit from each segment based on a specific proportion. For example, an interviewer may be told to sample 200 females and 300 males between the age group of 35, 45 and 60. Then the last sampling technique is known as snowball sampling. It is used when we do not have access to sufficient people with the characteristic we are seeking for in a sample population. We find some people to study and then ask them to refer us to the people who fit in the study requirements. This method of requesting referrals is continued until we have studied enough people. A researcher is studying environmental engineers but can only find 5. She asks these engineers if they know any more. They give her several further referrals who in turn provide additional contact. In this way, she manages to contact sufficient engineers and conduct her research. With this, I will end our presentation on data collection method and sampling techniques. I will meet you in the next section regarding questionnaire designing. Until then, thank you so much and take care of yourselves.